Okay, so in terms of my teaching and the question of whether it's theory or practice comes first, the answer is praxis, which is the space between theory and practice. Because the way that I see drama, it's about theory through practice. It's a theory through the body. And I think that we have this uncomfortable, sometimes can have this uncomfortable tension between the theory parts of drama teaching and the practical parts of drama teaching. And I think if you think, well, I've made the mistake in the past of thinking in those sort of dualistic ways about my subject, those binary ways about my subject, and sort of split it. And so you get the groan of the kids who go, "Oh, I've got a theory lesson now." But the fact is that they are interconnected, and the more that I use drama process to teach drama theory, if we're wanting to be purist about it, the more successful I am, I think. And that, again, I'm working with kids who are body smart, so the preferred mode of learning for them is through their body. So why would I turn the theory into always just a chalk and talk session?
Fundamentally, theory is embedded in everything, but I'm a very hands-on practical teacher. So I will hand them out the criteria and then we will discuss it so they have an understanding. And if you're really aware of the different learning capabilities, and the beauty of my situation is I will often start with a kid in year 10. So, and I've had this discussion with my husband who doesn't quite believe it. You can get to this middle week, first term of year 12, and I know every single idiosyncrasy of those kids and what pressure. We're talking only 15 kids in class, so it's a luxury. But I know who is on Ritalin, I know who's on antidepressants, I know who's having trouble at home, I know when they're hungover, I know all sorts of things. So although I come from theory, there are so many ways of addressing theory. You give you're always going to have a visual learner, so you give a handout, then you reinforce it with stuff on the board, and then as soon as you've done that, you take it into the space and show them how to do it. And in theatre, I don't teach drama, but in theatre they get up and their criterias for their performances, their hands-on design work, working collaboratively, using the director's vision, using the themes. They've already had a discussion about that stuff at the end of year 11. So first term goes really rapidly, and they've filled 5 criterias of 2 different sacks, and they don't even realise it's theory. It's just, I guess, in the delivery.
I suppose it depends on your students. I suppose in any drama classroom, the odds are the majority of kids are going to be more practice-based, as in they will much rather get up and do something than sit down and look at a chalkboard or whatever it is you're going to do. But I always like to start my class with some type of warm-up, and if you can key it into what you're teaching them, that's really good. So let's say that we can do that this lesson, and then as soon as they've done their warm-up, we can bring them back and introduce them to the topic. And it's a quick introduction so they can get an idea of what we're talking about and make connections between what they've just done in their warm-up game and what we're going to do in the next activity. So if it's going to be a long topic, so over a couple of lessons, I would put practice in at the start and put theory in throughout. Some teachers do, I've heard that some teachers do 1 lesson a week is theory. And I wouldn't do that, just because I don't want to sit down and teach a theory lesson for a whole lesson each week. I would much rather have the kids get up and do what it is we're asking. And I find, especially with the younger year levels in high school, they connect with it when they're doing it, and they don't want to sit down and think about it. They want to get up and have fun and play. And once you've done that, you can say, I want you now to have a think about what you've just done and why whatever happened. They're more willing to do that than if you were to tell them you're about to do a learning task and you're going to learn something and it's going to be educational. Because a lot of the kids at my school would just say, no, Miss Brooker, I don't want to do that today. And then I've lost them. So I suppose I work with practice first and just put the theory in a little bit. When I get to the year 10s, can handle it more, and I don't particularly lose them when I tell them we're doing theory. But again, it's the example of the practice and getting them to do it and therefore understand it. I have very few kids in my classes who can read something or even watch somebody else do it and automatically understand how they can do it themselves. So let's get them up and doing it. That's what I think.
I think this is an interesting question because I think most people would go for practice. So, which seems logical, like getting up and doing something and getting them excited and showing them how something works and then explaining the theory behind it. So that seems like the logical thing to do. But often, and that works. It really works. Like sometimes you can do something. You can do like a crazy Arto workshop with them, and get them to smell things and lick things and do shocking, crazy things and blindfold them and get them to walk around the room and feel bizarre things on the wall and play loud music and flash lights, and you can do all that sort of stuff and not actually give them any context for it at all. And then afterwards you can give them context and theory and talk about what it felt like and get their feedback and talk, and then go to the theatre practitioner and talk about what they did and why they did it and where it came from and how we use it now and how it manifests in our theatre now. And I think that's one really great way of doing it. But I also find that a nice traditional approach works really well and kids are really interested in it. So actually coming in and saying there was this incredible person who changed theatre, like this amazing person, his name was Bertolt Brecht, and he lived at this time, and this is the time that he lived in, and giving them a mini presentation about the actual theatre practitioner and the time that he lived and what was going on at the time contextually, and asking them questions about whether they know what was going on at the time, and it might relate to them in some way, to their family history, to their life, to something that happened to their grandparents. I find sometimes that the theory actually works really well because they're fascinated by the fact that it's part of the universe and part of the world. So starting with the theory sometimes I think is a really beautiful way to start, and then explaining to them how somebody's theatre evolved from a political movement, or through them trying to make a statement about something, or through an era. Or I find that that's really sometimes a beautiful way to start something, and it shows them that theatre is part of the world that they live in, and it shows them why theatre is what it's like why it is what it is today, and you can talk about how it's evolved and where it's gotten to and where that person got us to. So whoever you start with or wherever you start, you can talk about where we've ended up and why we've ended up where we've ended up, and I find that they find that relevant, and you can get them to talk about where they see that person's work in the work of today. So if you're talking about someone like Brecht, you ask them, you tell them about what Brecht's main theories were and what he was trying to achieve, and you ask them if they can see any of that style in the types of theatre that they see, and then you can start from that viewpoint, and then you can workshop from there. I find that sometimes that's a nice way to start, or you can find a relevant topic in their life that they can then use as a starting point to use the conventions of a theatrical practitioner from a long time ago, or a recent theatre practitioner. I feel like sometimes the theory works really well first, so it depends.
I'd like to say it's 50-50. In reality, I think and it depends on the type of teacher that you are, but for me, I always go back to the theory. It has to underpin everything we do. There's no point going, this is great activity that I want to do with the kids, but I don't really know why I'm doing it, and they don't really know why. And the biggest response I've got, especially early years of teaching, was the whole, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? I feel stupid. And if they know the why, and they know the how, and they know how it links to real world practice or why actors do this, then they seem to take it more seriously, and they seem to get really into it. Particularly, some of those activities that at younger year levels, like things to do with voice or really putting themselves out there and taking creative risks. I think if you go back to the theory, I might teach voice at year 7, and they need to know why I'm asking them to warm up and do these crazy trills and make themselves sound silly, and they need to know what it means to protect your voice and to use your voice in performance. So I always go back to the theory and explain the why and the how. It doesn't mean that I start with the theory. God, that would be boring. A lot of the time they embody it first, and then I say, okay, do you realise that this is what you're doing? Or how did you experience that? How did you find this? And then I think they start to go, oh, it's that light bulb moment of, oh, that makes sense now, I get it. So for me, I do always go back to the theory.
Okay, but in your teaching, you reckon you start with the practice?
Sometimes. But I always in the back of my head have, why am I doing this? So if we're teaching naturalism, I don't necessarily start with a whole big PowerPoint on Stanislavski, for example, but we might do some kind of activity, and then I'll say, what was it like to think about a real life, experience that you've had, and then act that out. How did that make you feel? Do you think it was more truthful? And then we'll kind of go around it that way. So I've always got it in my head, even if I haven't introduced it to the students yet. Or I might introduce it through like a YouTube clip, or might be an audio file that they'll listen to, and I'll say, right, now we're going to create something, and then we're going to talk about it. So yeah, it's always in the back of my head.